Some people run from pain thinking distance will heal them. They drink to forget, they sabotage to protect themselves, they push away anyone who might see the truth. But here's what they don't realize. Running from pain doesn't make you free. It just hands power to the people who never deserved it. She stumbled into the restaurant reeking of tequila, loud, reckless, desperate to humiliate herself so badly he'd walk away. What she didn't know. The silent man watching from the shadows wasn't just any date. He was Stefano Ivan, the Mafia boss who'd secretly bought her family's debt 3 weeks ago. He'd been watching her self-destruct from afar, waiting for this exact moment. As she crashed into his table, slurring insults meant to disgust him, he didn't flinch. He just stood, moved closer, and said 5 words that stopped her cold. "You're not the only one running." You are welcome, my viewers. Thanks for always following up on the channel. Kindly tell us in the comments section the exact time and location you are watching from. We would love to know so we can serve you better. The restaurant was the kind of place where silence cost more than most people earned in a month. White linen, crystal chandeliers, soft piano notes drifting through air thick with privilege. It was a temple to control, to power carefully displayed and never questioned. Chloe Wilbert shattered that silence the moment she walked in. She didn't walk, she stumbled, one heel catching on the marble entryway, her shoulder slamming into the brass doorframe. The hostess gasped. A waiter froze mid-pour. Conversations died like candles snuffed out. Chloe didn't care. Her hair, once pinned in an attempt at elegance, hung in dark tangles around her flushed face. Her dress, black, borrowed, too tight, was already wrinkled from the taxi ride where she'd finished half a bottle of cheap tequila. Her lipstick was smeared at one corner. Her eyes, glassy and unfocused, swept the room with something between defiance and despair. "Where is he?" she slurred loud enough that every head turned. "Where's my date?" The hostess, a young woman in a crisp uniform, stepped forward with practiced concern. "Miss, perhaps you'd like to." "I don't need to sit down," Chloe snapped, swaying on her feet. "I need to find the bastard who thinks he can buy me." A shocked murmur rippled through the dining room. Forks paused midway to mouths. A woman in pearls whispered something to her husband, her expression dripping with disgust. Chloe felt their judgment like heat on her skin, and she welcomed it. Good. Let them see. Let him see. From a corner table, partially hidden by shadows and a towering arrangement of white orchids, Stefano Ivan watched. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting on the stem of a wine glass he hadn't touched. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to a body that spoke of discipline and danger in equal measure. His face, sharp jaw, dark eyes, a mouth that rarely smiled, revealed nothing. Not surprise. Not disgust. Not even interest. He simply watched her unravel, as if he'd expected every stumble, every slurred word, every desperate attempt to destroy herself before he could. Chloe's gaze finally found him. She knew it was him, not because anyone pointed, but because he was the only man in the room who looked at her like she was exactly what he'd ordered. "There you are," she said, her voice dripping with venom as she lurched toward his table. She knocked into a chair, sent a water glass toppling. A waiter rushed forward, but Stefano raised one finger, barely a movement, and the man stopped cold. Chloe reached his table and gripped the edge with both hands, her knuckles white. Up close, she could see him clearly. The kind of handsome that didn't ask for attention, it commanded it. The kind of stillness that made you wonder what violence lived beneath. "So you're the one," she said, swaying. "The man who thinks he can own me because my father's a coward and a gambler." Stefano's expression didn't change. He leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sit down, Chloe," he said quietly. His voice was low, smooth, with an accent that turned her name into something else. Something intimate, something that made her stomach twist. "I'm not sitting down," she spat. "I'm not doing anything you tell me to do. You want to know why I came here drunk? Because I wanted you to see exactly what you're getting. A mess. A disaster. Someone not worth whatever sick game you're playing." She grabbed the wine bottle from his table and took a swig straight from it, red liquid dribbling down her chin. Around them, the restaurant had gone silent again, every eye locked on the spectacle. Stefano still didn't react. He just studied her with those unreadable dark eyes, like he was looking past the drunkenness, past the defiance, straight into the terrified girl underneath. "You're right," he said finally, his voice so calm it was almost cruel. "You are a mess." Chloe flinched. "But you're not a disaster," he continued, standing slowly. He was taller than she expected, broader. He moved like water. Smooth. Inevitable. "You're just scared." "I'm not scared of you," she hissed, even as her hands trembled. "I know." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. "You're scared of yourself." The words hit her like a slap. Before she could respond, before she could hurl another insult or take another drink, her knees buckled. The tequila, the adrenaline, the weight of everything. It all crashed down at once. Stefano caught her. His hands were firm but not rough, steadying her before she could hit the floor. The restaurant erupted in whispers, but he ignored them all. He looked down at her, at this broken, beautiful girl who'd tried so hard to push him away, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Something deeper. "The show's over," he said, not to her but to the room. He lifted her easily, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back. She tried to fight, tried to push against his chest, but her body had nothing left. "Put me down," she whispered, but it sounded more like a plea than a command. "No," Stefano said simply. He carried her through the silent restaurant, past the staring diners, past the horrified hostess. He nodded once to someone, a man in a dark suit by the door, clearly his, and the man immediately stepped forward to handle whatever needed handling. As they reached the exit, Chloe's eyes fluttered. She looked up at him, and for just a moment, through the haze of alcohol and shame, she saw something in his face that terrified her more than anything else. Patience. Like he'd known she would do this. Like he'd been waiting for her to fall apart so he could be the one to catch her. "Why?" she breathed. Stefano looked down at her, and finally, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Something sadder. "Because, Chloe," he said quietly, "you're not the only one who knows what it's like to run. Have you ever tried to push someone away by becoming someone you're not? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story." The night air hit Chloe's face like a cold slap, but it did nothing to clear the fog in her head. She was vaguely aware of being carried, of the solid warmth of Stefano's chest beneath her cheek, of the way the world tilted and swayed with each of his measured steps. "Put me down," she mumbled again, her words slurring together. "I can walk." "You can barely stand," Stefano replied, his voice maddeningly calm. They emerged into the restaurant's private parking area, away from the main entrance where curious eyes might linger. A black SUV waited, engine already running, exhaust curling into the cool Mexico City night. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. Stefano lowered Chloe carefully onto the leather seat. She tried to pull away, to maintain some shred of dignity, but her limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. Stefano crouched beside the open door, bringing himself to her eye level. This close, she could see the details she'd missed in the restaurant, the faint scar above his right eyebrow, the the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his eyes weren't just brown but flecked with amber in the streetlight. "Where would you go, Chloe?" he asked, and there was no mockery in it. Just a terrible, gentle truth. "Back to your apartment where the loan shark's men are probably waiting? Back to your father who sold you to pay his debts." She wanted to hit him. She wanted to scream that he was wrong, that she had options, that she wasn't as trapped as he made her sound. But the tequila had burned away her ability to lie, even to herself. "I hate you," she whispered instead. Something flickered across his face. Not hurt, but something equally human. "You don't even know me. I know enough. I know men like you think money gives you the right to." "To what?" He tilted his head slightly. "I haven't touched you. Haven't threatened you. Haven't demanded anything. You bought my father's debt." "Yes." He said it simply, without apology. 3 weeks ago. From a man who would have done far worse than arrange a dinner date. Chloe's breath caught. 3 weeks? The loan shark, Valdez, had told her father just 2 days ago that someone new wanted to meet her. That if she pleased him, arrangements could be made. She'd assumed it was another one of Valdez's schemes. Another way to squeeze money from her family's misery. "You've been watching me?" The thought made her skin crawl, and something else. Something she refused to name. Stefano stood, his expression unreadable again. "Making sure you were safe. There's a difference. That's what stalkers say." The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "Probably." He moved to close the door, but Chloe's hand shot out, gripping the doorframe. The sudden movement made her head spin, but she forced herself to focus. "What do you want from me?" she demanded. "Really?" Not the polite version, not the careful words. "What do you want?" For a long moment, Stefano just looked at her. The streetlight cast half his face in shadow, and Chloe saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not hunger, not possession, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Like he saw in her something he'd lost in himself. "I want," he said slowly, "to give you a choice you've never had before." "What choice?" "To stop running." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Chloe couldn't quite grasp through the tequila haze. Before she could respond, her stomach lurched violently. She barely had time to turn her head before she was sick on the pavement, her body heaving with violent tremors. Stefano didn't flinch. Didn't step back in disgust like she'd expected, like she'd wanted. Instead, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her without a word. Chloe wiped her mouth with shaking hands, humiliation burning hotter than the alcohol in her veins. This was it. This was the moment he'd finally see her as the worthless, broken thing she'd tried to show him in the restaurant. This was when he'd walk away. "I'll have someone clean that up," was all he said. Then he did something that made Chloe's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. He removed his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and it smelled like him. Cedar and smoke and something indefinably expensive. "I'm taking you home," he said. "My apartment is my home," he corrected quietly. "You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow, when you're sober, we'll talk." "And if I refuse?" Stefano's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something that looked almost like sadness. "Then I'll take you back to your apartment, pay off your father's debt, and walk away. But we both know what happens then, don't we?" Chloe did know. Valdez wouldn't be the last. Her father's gambling addiction was a bottomless pit, and there would always be another debt, another dangerous man, another bargain made with her as the currency. At least this devil had kind eyes. "One night," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "One night," Stefano agreed. He gestured to the driver, who'd been standing at a discreet distance. The man nodded and got back behind the wheel. Stefano slid into the seat beside Chloe, maintaining a careful distance between them. As the SUV pulled away from the restaurant, Chloe leaned her head against the cool window, watching the lights of Mexico City blur past. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Curiosity. Why? She asked, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd hear. But Stefano heard everything. Why what? Why go through all this trouble? You could have just... She waved her hand vaguely. Men with your kind of power don't usually ask. The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my sister used to say the same thing you said tonight. That she was a mess. A disaster. Not worth saving. His voice was steady, but Chloe heard the fracture beneath it. I didn't listen. I was too busy building an empire, making money, and accumulating power. And one day He stopped. Took a breath. One day she wasn't there anymore to say it. Chloe turned to look at him. In the dim interior of the SUV, Stefano's face was carved from shadows and old grief. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at something far away, something that still had the power to break him. I'm not your sister, Chloe said softly. No. Stefano finally met her gaze. But you're someone's daughter. Someone's friend. Someone who matters, even if you've forgotten how to believe it. The words slipped past every defense Chloe had built, finding the soft, scared place she'd tried to drown in tequila and self-destruction. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away furiously. Don't, she whispered. Don't be kind to me. I don't know what to do with kind. Then learn, Stefano said simply. The SUV turned onto a private road, leaving the city lights behind. Through the window, Chloe could see high walls, security gates, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. As the gates swung open and they entered Stefano's world, Chloe felt the tequila finally pulling her under. Her last conscious thought, as her eyes fluttered closed and her head came to rest, unbidden on Stefano's shoulder, was not of fear. It was of his hand, gentle and sure, steadying her as she fell. Chloe woke to sunlight that felt like punishment. It poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, merciless and bright, stabbing through her closed eyelids until she had no choice but to open them. She groaned, immediately regretting consciousness. Her head throbbed with each heartbeat, her mouth tasted like something had died in it, and her body ached in ways that suggested she'd fought a battle and lost. She blinked, trying to focus. This wasn't her apartment. Her apartment had water-stained ceilings and walls so thin she could hear her neighbors arguing. This room had crown molding that probably cost more than her yearly rent. The bed beneath her wasn't her lumpy mattress on the floor. It was a king-sized monument to comfort, dressed in sheets that felt like liquid silk against her skin. Panic hit her like ice water. Chloe shot upright, then immediately regretted it as the room spun violently. She gripped the edge of the mattress, breathing hard, trying to piece together the fragments of last night through the pounding in her skull. The restaurant. The tequila. Stefano's face as he caught her. The car. His jacket around her shoulders. She looked down. She was still wearing her wrinkled black dress, but someone had removed her shoes and placed them neatly by the nightstand. A glass of water and 2 pills sat beside them, along with a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. For the headache. You're safe. Yes. Chloe stared at the note, at the bold, precise handwriting that somehow matched the man who'd written it. Safe. The word felt foreign, almost laughable. She hadn't been safe since her father's gambling debts had turned their lives into a nightmare of threatening phone calls and men with dead eyes showing up at their door. She threw back the covers and immediately noticed something else. The dress, while wrinkled, was clean. No trace of the restaurant incident. No smell of tequila-induced sickness. Someone had cleaned her up while she was unconscious. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Chloe stood on shaky legs and made her way to the windows. What she saw took her breath away. The room overlooked a sprawling estate, manicured gardens, a fountain that looked like it belonged in a European palace, and beyond that, the mountains rising purple against the morning sky. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, the kind that didn't answer to anyone. She was in a gilded cage. Chloe spun toward the door, a massive thing made of dark wood with ornate iron hardware. She grabbed the handle and pulled. Locked. Of course it was locked. She pulled harder, then pounded on the wood with her fist. "Hey! Let me out!" Her voice cracked, still rough from last night's drinking. "You can't keep me here. This is..." The lock clicked. Chloe stepped back as the door swung open, revealing Stefano. He'd changed since last night. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by dark jeans and a white linen shirt rolled to his elbows. It should have made him look casual, relaxed. Instead, it somehow made him more dangerous, like seeing a wolf without its formal clothes, all lean muscle and predatory grace. He carried a tray. Coffee, she could smell it. And something else. Food that made her traitorous stomach growl despite everything. "You're awake," he said, as if she hadn't just been pounding on the door like a prisoner. "The door was locked," Chloe said, her voice sharp with accusation. "For your safety. You were drunk and disoriented. I didn't want you wandering the estate and hurting yourself." He moved past her into the room, setting the tray on a small table by the windows. "It wasn't locked from my side." Chloe wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The lock had opened easily enough when he'd turned the handle from outside. "Where am I?" she demanded. "My home. About 30 minutes outside the city." Stefano poured coffee from a silver carafe, the rich aroma filling the room. "Black? Or do you take it with cream?" "I don't want your coffee. I want answers." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Chloe felt suddenly conscious of how she must appear. Makeup smeared, hair a disaster, wearing yesterday's shame like a second skin. "Then sit," Stefano said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "And I'll give them to you." Chloe didn't want to sit. Didn't want to accept anything from this man who'd carried her away from her disaster of a performance like she was something precious instead of pathetic. But her legs were still shaky, and the coffee smelled like heaven, and she was so tired of standing on pride that kept crumbling beneath her anyway. She sat. Stefano pushed a cup toward her. "Drink first. Then we'll talk. Don't tell me what to do." "It's not a command, Chloe. It's a kindness. You look like you're about to collapse again." She hated that he was right. Hated the way her hands trembled as she reached for the cup. Hated how the first sip of coffee, perfect, exactly how she liked it even though she'd never told him, made her want to cry with relief. "How did you know?" she asked, staring into the dark liquid. "Know what?" "How I take my coffee." Something flickered across his face. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, remember? You go to the same cafe every morning. Black coffee, no sugar. You sit in the corner and pretend to read, but mostly you just stare out the window like you're looking for an escape route that doesn't exist." The accuracy of it, the intimacy of being so thoroughly observed, made Chloe's skin prickle. "That's creepy." "Yes," Stefano agreed without apology. "It is." His honesty disarmed her more than any excuse would have. Chloe took another sip of coffee, buying time, trying to organize her thoughts through the pounding headache. "Why am I really here?" she asked finally. "And don't give me that, for your safety bullshit." Men like you don't do things out of kindness. Stefano leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. What do you know about men like me? Enough. My father's borrowed from enough of them. They all want something. Power, money, control. She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. Or they want me, because apparently I'm the only currency my father has left. And you think that's what I want? You. Isn't it? Chloe's laugh was bitter. You bought my father's debt. You arranged a date. You brought me here. What else am I supposed to think? Stefano was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table between them. Open it, he said. Chloe's hands shook as she unfolded the document. It took her a moment to understand what she was seeing. Legal jargon, official seals, her father's signature at the bottom. And a single word stamped across it in red. Forgiven. What? Her voice failed her. I bought your father's debt 3 weeks ago for $200,000, Stefano said calmly. Yesterday afternoon, before our dinner, I had it legally discharged. Your father owes nothing. Not to Valdez. Not to me. Not to anyone. Chloe stared at the paper, her mind refusing to process the words. That's not possible. Why would you? Because you're right, Stefano interrupted quietly. Men like me always want something. Here it was. The catch. The price. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. What do you want? Stefano leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I want you to stop destroying yourself. I want you to understand that you're not your father's debt or Valdez's pawn or anyone else's property. He paused. I want you to choose to be here. Not because you're trapped, but because you want to be. Chloe felt something crack inside her chest, something she'd built carefully over months of degradation and fear. That's impossible. No one gives away $200,000 for nothing. I'm not giving it for nothing. Stefano's voice dropped lower. I'm giving it for the chance to show you that not everyone will use you. That not every man who has power will take from you. And what happens when I leave? When I walk out that door right now? Then you leave. The debt stays forgiven. Your father stays protected from Valdez's retaliation. I'll make sure of it. He stood slowly. But you'll go back to that apartment where you sleep on the floor because you sold your bed to pay last month's bills. You'll go back to skipping meals so your father can eat. You'll go back to waiting for the next debt, the next threat, the next man who won't give you a choice. Every word landed like a blow because every word was true. Why do you care? Chloe whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Stefano moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tight with tension. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old ghosts. Because 3 years ago, my sister sat across from me at breakfast and told me she was fine. That she could handle her debts, her mistakes, her life. She smiled. She drank her coffee. And 6 hours later she was dead. He turned, and Chloe saw the truth in his eyes. Raw, unhealed grief. I had all the power in the world, and I couldn't save her because she wouldn't let me. She was too proud, too scared, too convinced she had to face her demons alone. Chloe's throat tightened. You remind me of her, Stefano continued. That same pride, that same fear, that same belief that you're not worth saving. He crossed the room, stopping just before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. So yes, Chloe Wilbert, I bought your debt. I watched you. I waited. And when you showed up drunk last night, trying to make yourself so unlovable that I'd walk away, his jaw tightened. I saw my sister. And I promised myself I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth and pain and something Chloe couldn't name. I don't know how to let someone help me, she finally said, the admission tearing from somewhere deep. Then learn, Stefano said softly. Stay here. For 30 days. Let me show you what your life could be without fear. And at the end, if you still want to leave, I'll drive you myself. And if I stay? His eyes darkened. Then we see where this goes. Chloe looked at the forgiven debt on the table, at the man who'd paid her price without asking for payment, at the sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a world she'd never imagined touching. She should run. She should grab that paper and bolt before whatever this was became something she couldn't walk away from. But running had never saved her before. 30 days, she heard herself say. Stefano's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes, relief, maybe, or satisfaction, made Chloe's pulse quicken. 30 days, he agreed. The first 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Chloe had her own wing of the estate, a suite of rooms that included a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, a bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, and a private balcony overlooking the gardens. Stefano had made it clear she could go anywhere on the property except his personal office, which remained locked behind a reinforced door on the 2nd floor. Privacy goes both ways, he'd said when giving her the tour. She'd expected guards, locked doors, surveillance. Instead, she found freedom within invisible boundaries. Staff who nodded politely and disappeared, ground she could wander without question, and Stefano himself, who appeared at mealtimes like clockwork but otherwise left her alone. It was the leaving alone that unnerved her most. On the 4th morning, Chloe found him in the garden, kneeling in the dirt like he belonged there. He wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt, his hands dark with soil as he carefully transplanted seedlings into a prepared bed. The sight was so incongruous, this man who commanded an empire on his knees with a trowel, that she stopped and stared. Stefano looked up, squinting against the sun. You're awake early. I couldn't sleep. Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly conscious of the silk robe she'd found in the closet. Everything in her rooms fit perfectly, like he'd known her size before she'd ever arrived. What are you doing? Planting. He returned his attention to the seedlings, his movements careful and precise. Tomatoes. My mother used to grow them. Used to. Past tense. Chloe filed that away with all the other fragments she was collecting about this man who saved broken things. Can I help? The words escaped before she could stop them. Stefano paused, then gestured to a pair of gloves and a second trowel on the ground beside him. If you want. Chloe knelt, the morning dew soaking through her robe. She pulled on the gloves, 2 large, clearly his spare pair, and watched as he demonstrated the technique. Dig a hole. Ease the seedling from its container. Place it gently. Cover the roots. Pat the soil. They worked in silence for a while, the sun climbing higher, birds calling from the trees that lined the property. It was peaceful in a way Chloe hadn't experienced in years. No creditors calling. No father passed out drunk on the couch. No fear that the next knock on the door would be Valdez or someone worse. Why tomatoes? She asked finally. My mother said they were proof of faith, Stefano replied, not looking up. You plant something fragile, care for it, and trust that it will give you something back. Most people don't have that kind of patience anymore. Do you? He did look at her then, dirt smudged on his cheek, something almost vulnerable in his expression. I'm trying to learn it again. The moment hung between them, delicate as the seedlings in their hands. Then Chloe's phone buzzed in her robe pocket. She'd finally charged it yesterday after 3 days of avoiding reality, and the spell broke. She pulled it out with dirt-stained gloves, saw her father's name on the screen, and felt her stomach drop. I should, she started. Answer it, Stefano said quietly. I'm not keeping you from your family, Chloe. She stood, walked a few paces away, and pressed accept. Dad! Chloe! Jesus Christ! Where have you been? I've been calling for days. Her father's voice was thin with panic and something else. Withdrawal, probably, or the tail end of a bender. Valdez came by. He says the debt's been paid. He says some man bought it and then just erased it. What the hell is going on? Chloe glanced back at Stefano. He'd returned to his planting, giving her privacy but close enough that she knew he could hear every word. It's complicated, she said. Complicated? Chloe, nobody just forgives that kind of money. What did you do? What did you promise him? Her father's voice cracked. Baby, please tell me you didn't. I didn't do anything, Chloe interrupted, anger flaring hot and sudden. For once in my life, someone helped me without asking me to destroy myself first. Can you even imagine that, Dad? Can you imagine someone being kind without expecting me to pay for it with pieces of myself? Silence on the other end. Then quieter. Where are you? Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Chloe closed her eyes, fighting back the familiar guilt. I need time. 30 days. Then we'll talk. 30 days? Chloe, I'm your father. Then act like it. The words exploded out of her, raw and jagged. Act like you care about something other than the next card game or the next bet. Act like I'm your daughter instead of your get-out-of-jail-free card. She heard his sharp intake of breath, heard the hurt beneath the anger, and felt the old, terrible pull to apologize, to make it better, to be the good daughter who fixed everything. But she didn't. I'll call you in a week, she said instead, and ended the call before he could respond. Her hands shook as she lowered the phone. Behind her, she heard Stefano stand, heard the soft sound of him brushing dirt from his jeans. She waited for judgment, for the inevitable lecture about respecting your parents, for disappointment. Instead, he said, "That was brave." Chloe turned. Yelling at my father? Setting a boundary. Stefano moved closer, his eyes searching her face. Do you know how many people spend their whole lives unable to do that? Especially with family? It doesn't feel brave. It feels cruel. Sometimes they're the same thing. He held out his hand. Come on. There's something I want to show you. Chloe looked at his outstretched hand, still dirty from the garden, strong and steady and offering without demanding. She could refuse. Could walk away, back to her safe rooms, her comfortable isolation. Instead, she took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and he led her through the garden to a path she hadn't noticed before. It wound through manicured hedges and under a rose-covered arbor to a small structure half hidden by flowering vines. A greenhouse. Stefano opened the door and gestured her inside. The air hit her immediately. Warm, humid, alive with the smell of growing things. The space was filled with plants in various stages of life. Some flowering, some barely sprouted, all carefully tended. This was my mother's, Stefano said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. After she died, I couldn't come in here for 2 years. Couldn't stand the reminder of what I'd lost. What changed? Chloe asked, running her fingers along a terracotta pot. My sister. He moved deeper into the greenhouse, stopping beside a tall plant with broad leaves and small purple flowers. She dragged me in here one day and told me that hiding from grief doesn't make it smaller. It just makes you smaller. He touched one of the flowers gently. She said if I wanted to honor our mother, I should keep growing things. Keep having faith that something beautiful can come from pain. Chloe felt tears prick her eyes. And then she died too. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. 3 months later. He stood there, this powerful man surrounded by his dead mother's flowers and his dead sister's wisdom, and Chloe saw him fully for the first time. Not the Mafia boss. Not the savior or the threat. Just a man carrying the weight of everyone he couldn't save. "Is that why you really brought me here?" she asked quietly. "Because you think you can save me the way you couldn't save them?" Stefano turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity, not obsession, but recognition. The kind that happens when two broken things find each other in the dark. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "But now." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Now I think maybe we're saving each other." Before Chloe could respond, before she could process what that meant, a sharp knock sounded on the greenhouse door. One of Stefano's men, the scarred driver from the first night, appeared, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a situation." Stefano's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The softness vanished, replaced by cold efficiency. "What kind?" "Valdez. He's at the gate with 3 cars. Says he wants to talk about the Wilbert debt." Chloe's blood ran cold. "But you said it was forgiven." "You said." "It is." Stefano's voice was steel. "Which means this isn't about the debt." His eyes locked on hers. "It's about you." The greenhouse suddenly felt too small, too warm. Chloe's pulse hammered in her throat. "He'll hurt my father. If I don't." "Your father is already protected. I have men watching him." Stefano moved toward her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "But I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" Could she? Trust this man she barely knew, who'd appended her life with kindness that still felt too good to be real. But the alternative was going back. Back to Valdez's dead eyes and terrible smiles. Back to being currency instead of human. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Something fierce and protective flashed across Stefano's face. "Stay here. Don't come out until I send for you. No matter what you hear." "Stefano." He cupped her face with both hands, the gesture so tender it stole her breath. "I said I would protect you, Chloe. Let me." Then he was gone, striding out of the greenhouse with his man close behind, leaving Chloe alone among the flowers and the ghosts of the women he'd loved and lost. She sank onto a wooden bench, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. Through the glass walls, she could see Stefano crossing the garden, his phone to his ear, his movements sharp and purposeful. Men appeared from various points on the estate. Security she hadn't realized was there, converging like chess pieces moving into position. And beyond the walls, somewhere she couldn't see, Valdez waited. Chloe wrapped her arms around herself and did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed that someone else's promise would hold. The greenhouse was a cage made of glass and waiting. Chloe sat on the wooden bench, her hands gripping the edge until her knuckles turned white, straining to hear anything beyond the humid silence. Minutes stretched like hours. The warm air pressed against her skin, making it hard to breathe, or maybe that was just the fear. She shouldn't care what happened to Stefano. She barely knew him. For days wasn't enough time to trust someone, wasn't enough to feel this terrible clawing anxiety at the thought of him facing Valdez alone. But she did care. God help her, she did. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard footsteps approaching. Fast, purposeful. The greenhouse door opened and the scarred driver appeared, his expression carefully neutral. "It's handled," he said simply. "Boss wants you to come to the house." "Is he?" Chloe's voice caught. "Is he all right?" Something that might have been respect flickered across the man's face. "He's fine. Valdez is gone. Won't be coming back." Relief flooded through her so strongly her legs nearly buckled. She followed the driver back through the garden, through the massive main house, up a curved staircase she hadn't explored yet. They stopped at a door she recognized. Stefano's private office, the one place she'd been told was off limits. The driver knocked once, then opened it for her. Stefano stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the estate grounds. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, but Chloe could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. He turned when she entered, and she saw a small cut above his eyebrow, a smear of blood at the corner of his mouth. "You're hurt," she said, moving toward him without thinking. "It's nothing." But he didn't pull away when she reached up to examine the cut, her fingers gentle against his skin. "What happened?" "Valdez had ideas about renegotiating our agreement. I explained why that wouldn't be happening." Stefano's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, but Chloe could read the violence beneath it. "He understood eventually." "Did you?" She couldn't finish the question. "Kill him?" "No." Stefano caught her wrist gently, lowering her hand from his face but not releasing it. "I don't kill people for being stupid, Chloe. Just for being dangerous. Valdez is just stupid." He guided her to a leather chair, then took the one beside it, still holding her hand. The office was dark wood and masculine comfort. Built-in bookshelves lined with volumes that looked actually read. A massive desk covered with papers and monitors, photographs on the walls. Chloe's eyes caught on one of them. A woman, young and beautiful, with Stefano's dark eyes and a smile that could light up rooms. She was laughing at whoever held the camera, her whole face alive with joy. "Your sister," Chloe said quietly. "Isabella." Stefano followed her gaze, his expression softening and breaking all at once. "That was taken 6 months before she died. She'd just gotten accepted to art school. She was so happy." "What happened to her?" For a long moment, Stefano was silent. Then he stood, moved to a cabinet, and pulled out a leather portfolio. He handed it to Chloe. "See for yourself." Chloe opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Isabella at various ages. A child with paint-stained hands. A teenager at a gallery opening. A young woman surrounded by her artwork. And then the pictures changed. Isabella looking thin, drawn. Isabella with bruises she'd tried to hide with makeup. Isabella with dead eyes that reminded Chloe too much of her own reflection. "She fell in love with the wrong man," Stefano said, his voice hollow. "A artist. Charming, talented, broke. I didn't approve, so she hid it from me. Hid everything from me. The drugs he got her hooked on. The debts he racked up in her name. The way he hit her when she tried to leave." Chloe's throat tightened. "Stefano." "By the time I found out, she was in too deep. I paid the debts, $200,000, same as your father's. I got her clean. I set her up in a new apartment, new life. I thought I'd saved her." He laughed bitterly. "But I hadn't. I just put a bandage on a wound that needed surgery." He moved to another photograph on the wall. This one showed Isabella sitting on a park bench, her back to the camera, shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of worlds. "I had someone following her. For her protection, I told myself. One of my men took this picture 3 hours before she died." Stefano's voice cracked. She was 23 years old, and she couldn't see any way out of the shame, the addiction, the belief that she'd never be worth saving. "How did she?" Chloe couldn't finish. "Pills." Left a note that said she was sorry for being such a disappointment. Stefano turned to face her, and Chloe saw tears on his cheeks he didn't bother to wipe away. "My last words to her were, 'I'm busy, Isabella. We'll talk later.'" There was no later. Chloe set the portfolio aside and went to him. She didn't think, didn't question. She just wrapped her arms around him and held on while this powerful man who'd saved her shook with 3 years of buried grief. I see her in you, he whispered against her hair. The same pride. The same shame. The same belief that you have to handle everything alone. And when you showed up drunk that night, destroying yourself to push me away. His arms tightened around her. I couldn't let history repeat. I couldn't watch another woman He stopped himself. I couldn't watch you disappear. Chloe pulled back just enough to see his face. Another woman you what? Stefano's eyes met hers, raw and honest. Care about. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. 4 days. That's all it had been. 4 days wasn't enough time to care, to feel this magnetic pull, to want to know everything about someone. But time didn't measure in days when it came to recognition. When two people who'd been running from pain finally stopped long enough to see each other clearly. Show me the rest, Chloe said softly. The rest. Of this office. Of you. You know everything about me. You've been watching for weeks. But I don't know you. Not really. Something shifted in Stefano's expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. He stepped back, wiped his eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, looked almost uncertain. All right, he said finally. He showed her his mother's letters, kept in a wooden box on his desk. Read her one in halting Spanish, a recipe for tamales that turned into life advice, the way mother's letters always did. Mix gently. His mother had written. Rough hands make tough masa. Same with people, Mijo. He showed her the books on the shelves, philosophy and poetry mixed with business strategy. Pulled out a volume of Neruda, dog-eared and annotated in the margins. Isabella used to read these to me when I was building the business. Said I needed beauty to balance the darkness. He showed her the monitors on his desk, not surveillance, but security feeds protecting 32 families. People who work for me. People who depend on me. Every decision I make affects them. That's the weight of this life. And then he showed her a drawer in his desk, locked with a key he wore around his neck. Inside was another portfolio, but this one made Chloe's breath catch. Pictures of her. Not invasive. Not creepy. Just watching. Chloe at the cafe, lost in thought. Chloe walking through the market, examining produce she couldn't afford. Chloe sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons with a small smile that suggested she'd forgotten, just for a moment, how heavy her life was. I told you I'd been watching, Stefano said quietly. These are why. Chloe picked up one of the photos. In it, she was laughing at something. She couldn't remember what. But she looked alive in a way she'd forgotten she could be. You saw this in me? She asked. This person who could still laugh? I saw someone fighting to survive. Someone who hadn't given up, even though she had every reason to. Stefano moved beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. Someone worth saving, even if she couldn't see it herself. Chloe turned to face him fully. They were close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his breath hitched slightly when she met his gaze. I'm not her, she said. I'm not Isabella. You can't fix what happened to her by saving me. I know. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. This isn't about her anymore, Chloe. This is about you. About us. About what happens when two people who've been running finally stand still long enough to see each other. And what do you see? Stefano's eyes darkened. Someone brave enough to show up drunk rather than let someone else control her fate. Someone strong enough to set boundaries with a father who failed her. Someone beautiful enough that I've spent 3 weeks memorizing the way she takes her coffee just to have an excuse to be near her. Chloe's pulse thundered in her ears. Stefano! Tell me you don't feel it too, he interrupted, his voice rough. Tell me I'm alone in this and I'll never mention it again. But don't lie to me, Chloe. We've both had enough lies. She should lie. Should protect herself from this man who'd appended her life with kindness and vulnerability, and the kind of honesty that stripped away every defense she'd built. But she was so tired of running. I feel it, she whispered. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying. Stefano's thumb traced her lower lip, and Chloe's breath shattered. Then stop being afraid of it, he said. I don't know how. Then learn, Stefano repeated, the same words he'd said before, but now they carried different weight. We'll learn together. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to run, to retreat behind her walls. But Chloe didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't do anything except tilt her face up to meet his. The kiss, when it came, was soft. Gentle. Nothing like she'd expected from a man who commanded empires and faced down lone sharks. It was a question, an offer, a promise that she could stop this at any moment and he would let her. Chloe answered by pressing closer, her hands finding his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms as fast as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Stefano rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said. Not for 30 days. Not because of debt or obligation. Stay because you want to see where this goes. Chloe closed her eyes, feeling the pull of everything she'd been running from. Trust, connection, the terrifying possibility that someone could care for her without consuming her. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. Stefano's arms wrapped around her, solid and sure. But I'm more scared of letting you go. In the office, surrounded by ghosts and photographs and evidence of 3 weeks of watching, Chloe made a choice. Not because she was trapped. Not because she owed him. But because for the first time in years, she wanted to stay. Do you think people can be saved by love, or do they have to save themselves first? Let me know what you think in the comments. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a dream Chloe was afraid to wake from. Stefano took her into Mexico City, not to the expensive restaurants where she'd humiliated herself, but to the places he loved. A tiny taqueria where the owner called him Mijo and pinched his cheeks like he was still 10 years old. A bookshop tucked down a narrow alley where the proprietor knew his reading tastes and had saved him a first edition of Octavio Paz. A rooftop where they watched the sunset turn the city golden, and he told her stories about growing up here. The good parts before the violence, before he'd inherited an empire built on blood and necessity. I wanted to be a teacher, he admitted one evening, his hand intertwined with hers as they walked through a botanical garden. Can you imagine? Me in front of a classroom, teaching literature to teenagers who didn't care. Chloe laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. I can actually. You're patient. Kind when you let yourself be. Only with you, Stefano said, pulling her closer. The touches became more frequent. His hand at the small of her back as he guided her through crowds. Her fingers tangling in his hair as they kissed in the greenhouse surrounded by his mother's flowers. The way he pulled her onto his lap while they read together in his office, his chin resting on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. She told him things she'd never told anyone. About the first time her father gambled away her college fund and blamed her for being expensive. About the night she'd considered ending it all, standing on her apartment balcony, wondering if anyone would even notice. About the shame that lived in her bones, the belief that she was fundamentally unworthy of good things. Stefano listened to all of it without judgment, without trying to fix her. He just held her and said, "You're here. You survived. That makes you stronger than you know. One morning, she woke to find him gone and a note on his pillow. Come to the garden. She found him there with a small sapling in his hands, a space cleared in the earth beside his mother's tomato plants. What's this? She asked. A lemon tree. They take years to bear fruit. Patience and faith, just like the tomatoes. He handed her a trowel. I thought we could plant it together. A promise that we're both staying long enough to see it grow. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Stefano, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. Just plant it with me. They knelt in the dirt together, their hands working in tandem, and Chloe felt something inside her chest, something that had been locked tight for years, begin to unfurl like the leaves of the sapling they were planting. That night, she didn't go back to her wing of the house. She stayed with him, their bodies wrapped together in his bed, no barriers left between them. And when he whispered her name like a prayer against her skin, Chloe finally understood what it meant to be seen not as currency or burden, but as someone precious. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered into the darkness. Stefano's arms tightened around her. I fell the moment I saw you at that cafe, pretending to read but really just searching for an escape. I've just been waiting for you to catch up. Chloe buried her face in his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Not because someone had saved her, but because someone had seen her worth saving, and had taught her to see it too. She should have known it was too perfect to last. Her father showed up on a Tuesday morning, drunk and furious. Chloe was in the greenhouse when she heard the shouting. She ran toward the main house and found her father in the foyer, held back by two of Stefano's men. His face red with rage and something that looked like desperation. Dad! Chloe froze on the stairs. There she is. Her father's voice cracked. My daughter, playing house with a criminal while I rot in that apartment alone. Let him go, Stefano said quietly, emerging from his office. The men released their hold, and Chloe's father stumbled forward. You think you're better than Valdez? Her father spat at Stefano. You're all the same, buying people, controlling them, pretending it's kindness when it's just ownership. Dad, stop, Chloe pleaded, moving down the stairs. It's not like that. Isn't it? Her father's eyes locked on hers, and she saw the pain beneath the anger. He paid off the debt, sure. But what did he ask for in return, Chloe? What did you give him? The implication hit her like a slap. How dare you? I dare because I'm your father. Because I know how men like him operate. He turned back to Stefano. You think you're some kind of savior? You're just another man using my daughter to make yourself feel powerful. I think you should leave, Stefano said, his voice dangerously quiet. Not without my daughter. She's not your property to take. And she's not yours to keep. Her father's voice broke. You may have forgiven the debt, but what did it cost her? Her freedom? Her self-respect? Tell me, when you look at her, do you see a person or a project? Someone to save so you can feel better about the sister you lost. The words landed like bullets. Chloe saw Stefano flinch, saw the truth in them strike something vulnerable. That's not, Stefano started. Isn't it? Her father moved closer to Chloe, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath, the desperation in his sweat. He's been watching you, controlling you, making decisions about your life. How is that different from what Valdez wanted? At least Valdez was honest about what he was. Stop it, Chloe whispered, but doubt was already creeping in, cold and insidious. Her father grabbed her hand. Come home, baby. We'll figure this out together. We don't need his money or his protection. We just need each other, like it's always been. Chloe looked at her father, at the man who'd gambled away her future, who'd used her as collateral, who'd never once asked what she wanted. And then she looked at Stefano, at the man who'd bought her debt and forgiven it, who'd watched her for weeks before she knew he existed, who'd built a cage so beautiful she'd mistaken it for freedom. "Is it true?" she asked Stefano, her voice breaking. "Am I just a way for you to fix what happened to Isabella?" "Chloe, no. Answer me." Tears streamed down her face. "Did you choose me because you saw me, or because you saw her?" Stefano's silence was answer enough. "Oh God," Chloe breathed. She pulled her hand from her father's grasp and backed away from both of them. "You're right. You're both right. One of you used me to pay debts, and the other used me to pay guilt. I'm just currency to both of you." "That's not true," Stefano said, reaching for her, but Chloe jerked away. "Don't touch me. Don't." Her voice shattered. "I need to leave. I need to get out of here." She ran. Chloe spent 3 days in her old apartment, staring at water-stained ceilings and trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Her father had disappeared again, probably to another card game, another bar, another escape from the wreckage of his life. She was alone, just like always, and the silence should have felt familiar. Safe. Instead, it felt suffocating. On the 4th day, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find not Stefano, but an older woman in an elegant dress, holding an envelope. "Miss Wilbert? My name is Carmen. I worked for the Ivan family for 30 years. May I come in?" Chloe stepped aside numbly. Carmen sat on the worn couch and handed her the envelope. "Stefano doesn't know I'm here. But I think you need to understand something about the man you left." Inside the envelope were documents. Financial records showing the debt forgiveness, dated 3 weeks before the dinner, before Chloe had even known about the date. Medical records for her father, showing treatment at a private facility that Stefano had paid for. Receipts for her apartment rent, paid 6 months in advance. "I don't understand," Chloe whispered. "He forgave the debt the day he bought it," Carmen said gently. "Everything after that, the dinner, asking you to stay, wasn't about control. It was about giving you time to see you deserved more than survival." "But my father said—" "Your father is a desperate man trying to keep his daughter chained to his failures. And you're a smart woman who's so used to being used that you can't recognize love when it's offering itself freely." Chloe's hands shook. "He said I reminded him of Isabella." "You do. But not in the way you think." Carmen's eyes were kind but firm. "Isabella couldn't accept help because she thought she didn't deserve it. She ran from the one person who could have saved her because she was too proud, too scared, too convinced she had to face everything alone. Stefano sees that same fear in you, yes. But he doesn't want to fix you, child. He wants to love you. There's a difference." The words broke something open in Chloe's chest. "I told him he only chose me because of guilt. And it destroyed him." Carmen stood. "He hasn't left his office in 3 days. Won't eat. Won't sleep. Just sits there staring at that lemon tree you planted together and wondering if he pushed too hard, cared too much, tried to save someone who didn't want saving." Chloe buried her face in her hands. "What have I done?" "What your father taught you to do. Run from pain by hurting the people who care most." Carmen touched her shoulder gently. "But you can choose differently. You can go back. Not because you're trapped, but because you're brave enough to accept that sometimes the scariest thing isn't being used. It's being loved." After Carmen left, Chloe sat with the documents spread around her. Evidence of a man who'd set her free before he'd ever asked her to stay. Who'd protected her father even after he'd been cruel. Who'd planted a tree that would take years to bear fruit because he believed in futures built on patience and faith. She thought about her father's words. Running from pain only gives power to the wrong people. For once, she'd been running from something good. Chloe stood, grabbed her keys, and made a choice. Not out of obligation. Not out of fear. But because she was finally ready to stop running. She found Stefano exactly where Carmen said he'd be. In his office, staring out the window at the garden below. The lemon tree they'd planted stood small and fragile in the earth, a promise neither of them had been sure they could keep. He didn't turn when she entered, but she saw his shoulders tense. "You should have told me," Chloe said quietly, "about forgiving the debt before the dinner. Would you have believed me?" Stefano's voice was rough, like he'd been screaming or crying or both. "Or would you have thought it was just another manipulation?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Probably the latter. That's why I didn't tell you." He finally turned to face her, and Chloe's heart cracked at what she saw. 3 days of grief carved into his features, the same devastation she'd seen when he talked about Isabella. "I wanted you to choose to stay because you felt safe, not because you felt obligated. And when my father showed up and said all those things, why didn't you defend yourself?" Stefano moved closer, each step deliberate. "Because part of what he said was true. I did see Isabella in you. I did choose you partly because I failed her." He stopped just before her, close enough to touch but not touching. "But Chloe, that's not why I fell in love with you." Her breath caught. "Why then?" "Because you're brave in ways Isabella never was. Because you showed up drunk to push me away, but you were still willing to fight. Because you set boundaries with your father even though it broke your heart. Because you planted a tree with me and laughed like you'd forgotten the world could be beautiful." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because when I'm with you, I'm not trying to fix the past. I'm trying to build a future." Tears streamed down Chloe's face. "I ran because I was scared. Because accepting that someone could love me without taking from me felt impossible. And now? Now I understand what you meant that first night. That running from pain only gives power to the wrong people." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I gave power to my father's guilt, to Valdez's threats, to my own belief that I wasn't worth saving. And when you offered me something real, I ran from that too." Stefano's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "You're here now. That's what matters." "I love you," Chloe said, the words falling from her lips like a confession and a prayer. "Not because you saved me, but because you taught me I was worth saving. Because you gave me freedom and then asked me to choose you anyway. Because you see me, not as a project or a replacement, but as me." Stefano pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you too. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything from the beginning. I'm sorry I let you think even for a moment that you were anything less than a choice I'd make over and over again." "Then choose me now," Chloe whispered. "Not for 30 days. Not until the lemon tree bears fruit. Choose me for as long as this lasts, however messy it gets." "Always," Stefano breathed and kissed her. This kiss was different from the first, not gentle or questioning, but claiming and certain. A promise sealed not with words but with the kind of honesty that only came from being truly seen. When they finally broke apart, Stefano took her hand and led her to the window. Outside, the lemon tree stood small and hopeful in the afternoon sun. "It'll be years before we taste those lemons," he said. Chloe leaned into his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the safety she'd finally learned to accept. "Good," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in her life, Chloe meant it. She'd stopped running. She'd come home. Have you ever found love in the last place you expected? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching. Kindly like and subscribe for more videos like this.